So let's get started. My name is Ted M. Young. JitterTed's TDD game is why we're here. A little bit of history of the game. I'm a teacher, trainer, coach. I've been a software developer for decades, but these days I am doing lots of training and coaching. And one of the things I teach is test-driven development. And over the years, as I've been sort of teaching it and doing it myself, I basically refined it to sort of a 10 little step process. So most of the time, probably familiar with the three-step process of red, green, refactor. But sometime back, I sort of really laid out what is the process that I actually follow. And at least for the red, green part, it turns out to be this. So I drew this up several years ago and used this in my training classes. And one of the things that I wanted to do was just find a way for people to remember the steps. And so the original idea was just, maybe I'll make each one of these steps a card and then have people put them in the right order. But when I looked at this, and I don't remember if it was me or somebody who had mentioned, it's like, hey, that looks like a game board. And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess so. And so I did some early development, and a friend of mine who's big into board games helped me do some of the original sort of thinking about this, and came up with some prototypes, and he and I played, and we made some cards. Here, I'll show this. So I made some cards like this and this and this, and scribbled stuff out. And so that was sort of the origin of it, and we played it and revised it, and it turned out to be kind of fun. Like my goal was not to make a fun game, to be honest. My goal was to make something that would help people remember these steps. But over time, it's like, hey, this is like, as I was playing with my friend, it's like, hey, this is actually kind of fun. And he said so, and I'm like, really? And so I decided to further develop it. And so about, gosh, couple of years ago now, when we could still meet in person, I went to the Agile Open Northwest conference and basically did some test plays there and got some good feedback. One person by the name of Falco sort of found a way to slightly break the game, so I fixed that. But in general, got some good feedback, made some revisions. One of the original ideas is, so let me actually now show you the game. So couple of things. One is these hex cards. This is from my original prototype that I used for play testing, but I'll show what the print and play version looks like. It's actually much more in color. So the center hexagon is from the print and play version, and some of these other cards, and I'll show the hex cards. Basically, they look like this. So you can cut them out, and they're different colors and different places. And so, as you can tell, I'm a little bit of a fan of hexagons. And so the way the game works is you basically move through the steps that you would do to go through the full TDD cycle. And so originally there were some cards that were what I originally called sort of attack cards. But after some playing, I realized that it's really not an attack card. Let me grab here it is. So some of the attack cards are Code Bloat and Can't Assert, and I'll go through sort of what these are. And so originally the idea was, as a two-player game, you sort of play it on somebody else's workspace. And so the idea is you pick cards and you go through cards and you end up with cards in your workspace. But it turned out to be actually more interesting that when you hit one of these, it was as if you found this problem in your own code base and you had to deal with it. So it turned from attack cards to just tech debt cards. And there's also this idea of risk that we take on if we skip certain steps. So let me now sort of go through how the game is played. So as you can see, there's hexagons, and it's arranged in a certain order. And with the print and play version, there's actually, your sort of first task is to assemble the board, and you have to figure out in which order it goes in. Now, there is a key to tell you how to lay it out properly, but sort of part of the learning aspect of it is just get the board set up so that it's in the right order. It tells you here is the correct board setup. You can sort of hide that and lay it out to make sure that you've put things in the right order, put the steps in the right order. So the way the game starts is, basically your basic turn consists of dealing yourself and getting into your hand 3 cards. So up here on the top, I have sort of the print and play version of the card. So each card has the back of the card, and then there are various actions. And so these are from my prototype, but it was just easy. It's easier, a little bit easier to handle with these. So there's various cards, and we'll walk through each one of these to see how they work. And so your goal is to basically go around and commit code without having to revert. And so if you have risk, if you take on risk, then by skipping certain steps, such as writing tests or getting them to fail or pass, then you have to revert and go back to step 1. And so when you're playing the 2-player game, it's basically whoever gets to 5 commits first, they are the winner. If you can actually play this as a solo game, and it's just, you can just play and try out different strategies. But it's a lot more fun with 2-player. I haven't tried it with more than 2 players. You just need more cards, but it's certainly possible to play that way. And so the way you go around the board is each hexagon has an exit criteria. So in order to basically get to the next card, so I'm going to deal myself 3 cards. And these cards, it's open face, so you don't actually need to hide your cards. So that makes it a little bit easier to play. And so if I get dealt these cards, then my goal is to discard to move on to the next step. And so a turn is basically playing or discarding 3 cards from your hand. So once you've done that, then your turn is over. You draw back to a full hand, and then your turn, and then you're basically the next person goes. So I'm gonna basically say, all right, I'm gonna discard one of the right code cards. So I'll discard that, and then I'll move. And so to exit this step, so what should it do? That's the first step in test-driven development. How do you know what it's going to do? And then the next step is, how do you know it's going to do it? Right. So this is, what kind of test are you going to write? So that's sort of the thinking behind that. And so to exit from here, we discard another card. I'm going to discard the less code card. And then at this point, to exit, I need to write code, or I can skip to down here, which is basically write your feature code, but I take on risk, and I take on a lot of risk here. So I take on +3 risk. And so if I did that, I would have to say, all right, my cycle risk is now 3. And so for the print and play version, one of the things you'll need to do is you'll need to have some extra pieces like pawns to figure out, who's where. You'll need a 6-sided random number generator, like a 6-sided die is a good random number generator. And you'll need something to keep track of your cycle risk, your code risk, and your commits. You can use little pieces of Lego, just don't step on them, or you can use things from other games. And so if I decided, you know what, I'm going to skip, I'm going to take on risk. So that means your cycle risk is 3, and that affects it when you go to commit. That's where the randomness comes in. So I'm going to now discard this card and take on 3 new cards, and then it's my next turn. And so now so if it were 2-player, the other player would go, but now I'm going to go on my next turn. And so to exit here, we need to write code. So that means I need to basically play a write code card. Now, one of the things about writing code is good when we're doing test-driven development, but we also sometimes write too much code. And so one of the things about this game is it has this test results aspect. So if I want to write code, I may decide to be safer, I'm going to try and write less code. So I've basically played a write code and a less code card, and I'm going to discard this other write code card. And so then on my next turn, in order to exit, I need to basically run my tests. But one of the key things about how I teach test-driven development is this idea of prediction, precise prediction. So when I'm doing TDD, not only do I say I expect this to pass or fail, I am very precise about how I expect it to well, pass is no precision needed there. But when it fails, I need to predict precisely how it fails. Not just it's going to fail, but it's going to fail because it's calculating this, and it should be 3 and not 2 as it currently is. So when we want to exit from here, we need to predict. And so I play my predict card. And that means I now pick a test results card to see what happened. And so if I pick this card, it basically says, if I have one or no less code cards, then it was an unexpected test result. And that happens. Sometimes you predict and the tests don't pass as expected. And so in this case, if it's unexpected, basically, I don't go anywhere. I don't get to leave. So that card gets discarded and I have to try again. So I don't have any other predict cards, so I'll discard those, but I have another less code cards. So I'm going to play that as well. And so you can play up to 2 less code cards, and that helps with then getting past the test results. So I'll deal my cards again, my turn again. I'm going to predict. And now that I've got 2 less code cards, this one says, as predicted, so your tests ran and matched your prediction, so I get to exit. So now I can clean up, discard all my cards, clean up the right code cards. I get to move ahead. And so to exit, basically I discard my hand, so I already did that. Now I took on some risk, so I have to roll the die. So I'm not safe yet. And so if I roll a die, it's basically if I roll more than the risk, then it's success. And so I rolled a 6, lucky me, which was more than the 3, and I basically get to add a commit there. Now the thing is I took on risk, so that cycle risk doesn't go by itself. It basically gets because I've now committed code where I basically skipped a whole bunch of steps, and so that risk stays there and affects the commit opportunity next time. Now there are ways, so there's a refactor card, which can basically reduce your risk. And so you can play that, it reduces your risk, and then you discard it. And so the refactor cards help reduce the risk. You can take on risk by skipping steps. And then, as I mentioned, there are the tech debt cards. And so there are 2 kinds of tech debt cards. One of them is code bloat, this idea of your code is too bloated. And so if you get that card, it immediately affects you. And so if you had written code with a less code, it basically gets rid of one of them. And so it acts as, it makes your tests less predictable. Can't assert. And so this basically means you get stuck here because you're about to write code, but you can't figure out how to write the assert. And so you get stuck there. And the only way to get out of that is to basically skip a turn, or if you happen to have a refactoring card, that always helps, makes things easier to test, and you can play that card. So that's basically the game, and the instruction booklet sort of talks about all that stuff in a little bit more detail. And the print and play version, so these are the hex cards and that you lay out, and then these are the individual cards. And so what I use is these card sleeves. You can use the card sleeves just by themselves, or you can sort of stick in a playing card to make it a little bit stiffer. And you print out basically as many as you need for the number of players that you're playing with. And so these are the backs of the cards. This is what it looks like if you print it out in grayscale. And we've got our other cards, our predict cards, our score tracker cards, the test results cards, and the back of those, although I'm going to revise this to not use so much orange because these were meant originally designed for printing on actual cards like I've done here in production, but I don't want to waste all your orange ink. So I'm going to basically change the background of those to not be so orange. So that's the game. If you got any questions or thoughts, I'm happy to answer those now, but that was my intention, is to give you a little bit of a flavor of the game and what the print and play version looks like.
Thank you. My recollection's a little fuzzy, but did you tweak the risk part of it where it's now split into the two types?
Right. Yep.
And the only way you get code risk is through the cycle risk. You don't directly ever bump the code risk up.
Right. The code risk comes only if the cycle risk remains. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a tweak because it was again sort of like, well, that risk doesn't really go away at the end just because you committed, and so wanted to give a little bit of a flavor of that, because otherwise people would like, oh, I'm just going to really take on risk all the time, and it has no effect on the future, and I want to inject a little bit of that flavor. So yeah. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? So the print and play files, I'm finalizing them, and basically probably by the end of the day they'll be made available for those of you who bought, and I know some of you already did, and I really appreciate that. I mean, I've for a long time wanted to get the production printed versions in, but there was some stuff that I wasn't quite thrilled with, but I figured, you know what, done is and out there is better than perfect. So
thanks for seeing it that way.
Yeah. And for those who nagged me, sorry about that, but thanks for nagging. So I actually am going to have someone do some cleanup on this for getting them actually into production. The game crafter setup is almost done. So probably February timeframe is when I'll have some initial copies actually of the physical product to offer. And you'll get a credit of probably most of the money you spent on the print and play if you bought the print and play against the physical version. So don't feel like you won't get any benefit from that. And this has been play tested, a dozen times, but it doesn't mean it's perfect or it's there yet. So when you get it, if you have any feedback or any comments, don't hesitate to let me know. And if you buy the print and play, you'll get all revisions as I get them out there. All right. That's all I had for you. And so I really appreciate your support and the time spent on looking this over. And I'll look forward to getting feedback from playing the game.
Thank you, Ted.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, everyone.
I really think that this technique of TDD is powerful and yet hard for certain people to pick up.
Yep.
If this can help those people, like some people it just made sense and they started doing it, but another group that hasn't, if this can help, be the gateway to them doing it, you're doing a good thing for humanity.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, and I hope people like, I teach this, and I also do learning ensembles or mob programming, and it's just fascinating how easy it is to hit the run button on the test without saying, how do I think this is going to fail? And then it fails for the wrong reason, and they don't realize it, and then they move on with basically an incorrect assumption. And so yeah, so if it can just get them that, then yes, I will consider this a wild success. So. All right. That's all, folks. Thank you so much, and I'll see you around the internets. Bye.